Hi, welcome to Mind and Body Wellness, a television show about the wellness of your mind, body, and spirit. I'm your host, Clovis Colley, and we interview guests from the mainstream to the out of the ordinary a little bit. Today I have a corporate coach with me, a friend of mine I've known for a long time, Scott Anderson from Double Dare Coaching. How are you, Scott?
I'm great, Clovis. Thanks for having me.
Now, we got to start to talking about some of the things that have went on in your life, and you transcended from, if you don't mind me using the word transcend, from advertising executive, and now you're a licensed counselor and a life coach or a corporate coach.
Right. Yeah. I was in the advertising business for a long time. I had my own agency, which I sold to the employees in December of 2014, and within that company I had started what amounts to a corporate coaching practice that I took with me when I sold the agency. And during that time also I did get a master's degree in clinical counseling, in part to help me with at ease with our post-traumatic stress disorder clinic for military families. But I do a lot of work with succession planning with family-owned businesses. I typically work for business owners, and having a degree in or being able to deliver mental health therapy is a definite plus in a lot of the cases that I get involved in.
I see. So you got a little combination there. You know maybe the advertising or the promotional end of the business, and maybe some of the stuff that goes along with owning a business. And
right.
To me, owning a business is like a competitive sport, and sometimes you got to have the mental edge to maybe weather the storm a little bit.
Right.
What kind of advice would you give a business owner that's
the
maybe
people
not doing so well? Or
okay. Well, the people that I work with are typically they are entrepreneurs. They've often founded their own companies, but in any case, they are the principal owners of the business. And it is pretty lonely at the top, let's say, and that's true in corporate America, but it's especially true in entrepreneurial companies and small businesses. And there really isn't very many people to talk to. And you certainly can't confide in your employees if you're having a bad time, or you don't want really to concern them or worry them. So, one of the most important things I would recommend is find somebody to talk to, and it could very well be your lawyer or your accountant or some mentor of some kind, but it can become an echo chamber owning your own business, and you can start believing your own ideas, and maybe to your detriment, and lose objectivity. So to get anybody to bounce ideas off of is really helpful.
Oh, sure. I'm sure you could fall in a hole in some endless loop, and now it's your job to make sure people don't fall into those holes and regurgitate information back to each other that's not very useful.
I was meeting with a client today who is in the security system business, and his father was very, very successful in the residential part of that, the homeowner security system and alarm and monitoring business. And he had been told his whole life that's really the business to be in, not commercial alarms, not in business buildings alarm systems, but only in residential. And so he believed that was true for a long time, but it was really just his father's bias and his father's maybe limitation to some degree. And it's taken this client a while to get that, this is just an old idea that I swallowed hook, line, and sinker. From a well-meaning parent, but it turns out really for him, a much better business to be in is, for him personally, is in the commercial alarm business. So again, if you don't have anyone to talk to, or you don't have anyone who will question your old ideas, then you may never discover that some of them are superstition or completely untrue, and limit yourself in a way that you really don't need to.
Boy, isn't that true all over life? Don't we set up our own little paradigms that we can't get out of? And
exactly.
The analogy is the glass ceiling for the fleas. If you put it on there long enough, the flea won't jump out, or the elephant tethered to a small stake.
Right, and so we're trained much like the fleas and the elephant by a variety of different factors, parents typically, and of the extended family that we're from, or the the part of the country that we live in, what have you. But it's really true that we do internalize ideas and take them as gospel, and without being able to kind of explain it to somebody else or talk to somebody else, we might go our whole lives believing something that's entirely untrue.
Well, I think a lot of people do, unfortunately. Now, how do you ferret that out of somebody? How do you nail down those ideas? Maybe they may be holding on to that,
Right.
That maybe are suspect, but they can't, that are in their blind spot.
Right. You know, it's really just to reflect back, in a lot of cases, to reflect back to them a statement that they've made. In this case, for example, my client, I could not get him to consider possibly abandoning the residential security business, even though there are a lot of problems that come with that business. But he just would not see it, could not see it. And I said, why are you holding on to this so hard? You know, what is it about this business? We've gone through the math of it, and the math isn't making sense really. Why are you holding on to it so hard? And ultimately, you know, discerned that he had heard his whole life that that's the business to be in.
Right. Well, I've worked with a few people in the real estate business and some
Right.
different things from a hypnotist point of view. And people have these paradigms, and if we can bust the paradigms for them, all of a sudden they're
Right.
they're just doing things that they didn't know they could do. And
Yeah.
I come from the viewpoint that all people are basically about the same if everything's working okay, if they don't have, some medical
Right.
limitation or something
Sure.
like that. And if somebody else can do it, so can another person. Maybe
Exactly.
a 5-foot-tall person can't be a basketball player effectively, but overall,
Right.
in general.
Right.
Now, what kind of stark differences have you seen? Have you ever been able to just really get in there and bust up somebody's maybe belief that just was not true at all, and just seen them like go off like a rocket because they were able to bust up a few paradigms?
You know, actually, the client that I'm talking about is a good example, but it seems like all of my clients go through that. I went through this myself, I mean, the first coach that I ever hired, I didn't know what a coach was. I was frustrated and I was stymied and thought I was in a hole I couldn't get out of. And I had a whole bunch of reasons why I thought I couldn't do anything else. And my first coach, wonderful guy named Kevin Ross, really, one of the questions that he used to ask was, who taught you that? Who taught you that, and this is actually used in a lot of different forms of therapy, but who taught you that this is the only thing you can do, or this is the only way to do
Right.
this, or whatever? And it's a pretty revealing question. These thoughts don't come out of nowhere, our various beliefs, but whether it's hypnosis or corporate coaching or counseling or whatever, so much of it has to do with believing things that we've never taken a look at, that we've never questioned, and they turn out to be very, very limiting.
Right. So you were there, and you were in the advertising agency, and things were going along pretty well. And then
Yeah.
you kind of steered onto this. Is this something that just struck your fancy, and,
Right.
and you really had a passion for it, and you said it's time to quit doing what I was doing before. I want to move into this new
That's a
thing.
great question because I hired a coach not knowing what a coach was. My business was great. I had tremendous business partners who were much better at everything than I was or will be. And so my frustration was more about just the feeling that I'm not doing what I ought to be doing. So I talked to this coach, to Kevin Ross, about that thing. I couldn't put my finger on it. I just knew I needed to do something different, and wasn't really sure of what that could be or how I could do it, and so on. And he really helped me open my mind to the idea. Normally most of the clients that I work with, and I was this way in the beginning, is that we sort of see our options as A and B, and by the time I see most people, they see A and B, and they're both terrible. Right?
Right.
Not seeing that there's C through Z and 1 through 100 and all kinds of other options. So to begin with, it's just to help the client see that there are lots and lots and lots of options. We paint ourselves into these corners that don't really exist.
Oh, sure. Now, I probably should have started out by asking you this question, and I've interviewed a few life coaches. What's going on? How come all of a sudden we have all these life coaches and stuff, and where did that come from? This is a
Yeah.
pretty new type
Sure.
of thing.
Well, it's interesting. It's the original idea of a life coach, or the word life coach, came from a institution in San Rafael, California, where I got all of my training actually, and they created the term life coach, and it was sort of a hybrid between therapists on the one hand and counselors that were really, the objective there was to fix something that was broken, essentially, a medical model of there's something wrong with you and help fix this. And these folks came at it from sort of a positivist attitude, and the assumption was there's nothing wrong with you, you're a rock star. Kind of like as what you said. I mean, the problem is, it isn't you don't have a problem per se. And really that you can solve your own problems. And this sort of has roots in of a couple of different forms of psychotherapy. But essentially what the therapist would say is a problem, the coach would say is, it's maybe a temporary obstacle, but the supposition from the very beginning is that the client is creative, resourceful, and whole. And there's nothing broken or wrong with the client. And in fact, the client, when in the right environment, will solve their own problems and will achieve the dreams they want to achieve. The other difference though between therapy and coaching is that, basically my clients tell me what they want. I don't have a vote or a point of view. It's entirely what they want to do. And so my report card is, did they get there or not?
Right.
And so I'm willing, as my first coach said to me, I'm willing to look bad to make you look good. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get my clients from point A to point B. And for example, one of my coaches I told when I first started working with him, I'm paying you a lot of money, I really want your help, and if it looks like I am chickening out of anything, I want you to hit me in the side of the head with a 2x4 or the verbal equivalent to get me out of this, because I don't let me chicken out, right? And that's a lot of what coaches do, is really hold people accountable with the complete agreement of the client.
Right.
So I made the mistake of telling this guy that I wanted to write a book I thought would be good for my coaching practice, and he said, when can you have me the outline? And I thought, oh no, I shouldn't have said that out loud. And then I found myself, by June, I remember saying, I blurted out June, I don't know where that came from, and by June I had an outline, and by September I had a book, which has really helped my business. But I know I would not have gotten there without the accountability and the focus that my coach brought to the table. So yeah, good question, where did it come from? But it's actually been around for a long time, started on the West Coast, very popular in West and East Coast in business and that'd be corporate coaching or executive coaching, and then also coaching individuals in the form of life coaching. Again, been around for 20 years at least on both coasts and in Europe. It's finally kind of coming to the Midwest.
Well, I'm sure some people hear that and they just go, oh, it sounds really like a bunch of crazy stuff. I'm fine. I don't need any.
Well, exactly. And coaches would agree. If you're fine, you're fine. That's great. The kind of people that I talked to a guy today who in Philadelphia, wonderful guy who I just met on the phone, and what he wants to do, he's got a plastering business in Philadelphia, and what he wants to do in the next 3 years is to figure out a way to run his business from his 44-foot boat in Chesapeake Bay. That's what he wants, right? So I said, okay, man, we're gonna, this is what you want, so this is what we're going to do. And we are. I mean, we just, once you decide what it is, and once you can define it with almost molecular clarity, down to the last detail, it's amazing what starts to happen, especially if someone's holding you accountable to keep moving.
I've seen it before, and it's remarkable, at least, when you start putting down times and exactly what you want to have happen. And I know you have, and I have seen people that complain that they're not getting anywhere, but they haven't picked out where they want to go in any way, shape, or form. And after you talk about it, it becomes obvious. But I think that illustrates maybe
Exactly.
why we need life coaches.
Exactly. My first coach, Kevin Ross, is a reverend in the Unity Church, and he has a huge super church in Sacramento now. But the first thing that he told me was, and he can deliver this line much better than I can because he's a very fiery kind of a preacher guy. But anyway, he said, if you can get clear about the what, God will supply the how, from his perspective. And that's really been my experience. I mean, when I'm not going anywhere, it's because I really haven't declared where I'm going. And it may be too early, too soon for me to be able to say that, but it's really, once I've decided, and particularly with the help of someone who is just completely in my corner and wanting me to stay focused. So for example, I hired Kevin for a 90-day commitment. And the two things that came out of it was by the end of it, I was clear that I wanted to be a coach and had kind of been one, but didn't realize it. And that took a lot of doing and busting up a lot of superstitions and myths that just weren't true.
Now, when you say superstition, are you just saying a belief that has no grounding in reality? Is that
Right,
what you're calling
right,
a superstition?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it was just...
Maybe doesn't have a factual basis, but it's been something you've learned a long time
yeah,
ago.
and just believed it,
Okay.
Anyway, in 90 days' time, I went from not knowing what I wanted to do to discovering two really important things about me. One of them was that I wanted to be a coach. I wanted to receive training and get really good at it. So by the end of the 90 days, I had launched a practice called yourtruepurpose.com, which was originally a life coaching site, and used that for a long time. But in 90 days' time, I had the site built and up. I also decided during that period that I wanted to do something to help military families that were suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and with the help of a number of people, including Dr. Sorrell, who you'll talk to, we started an organization called At Ease USA, and 90 days later we had solicited $25,000 worth of donations. We had a website built for ateaseusa.org. And we were rolling. We had an RFP that we put out to the behavioral health institutions in Nebraska. Now, and the reason I mention that is not because I'm great, but because coaching is so powerful. So I went from entirely unclear to crystal clear and delivering on all of that at a rate of speed that I don't think I've ever matched again. That kind of velocity is amazing.
Well, that's really amazing. Now, I have a story I tell. I have a friend that's in a multi-level marketing business.
Sure.
And he is one of the guys that has reached the top, and he's making insane amounts of money.
Right.
And he talked to me about goal setting, and he said, if you don't have it on paper with a date,
Yes.
it ain't going to happen.
That's right.
And the interesting thing is, he told me that I may have said this on the show before, so forgive me for repeating it, but he just, as kicks, he put down he wanted to go to outer space. Well, long story short, he ends up running into the lady that sells the tickets for the rides on the space shuttle that they're going to be doing here in 2 or 3, this private outfit thing, and he got himself a ticket. Now, that left my jaw hanging open. Is our unconscious mind, as some metaphysical people, they refer to it as the universe, is our unconscious mind that powerful that if we set a goal like that it will fill in the blanks that successfully?
I really think it is. I've just seen in case after case after case. And whether we take sort of a metaphysical or mystical point of view, or whether we simply understand that our brain is neutral, and if we focus it on something, if we give it that instruction or program it like a computer, it will find what it is we focus it on. I mean, I think most people have found, if you're ever shopping for a car, for example, every minute until you decide to buy a car advertising on television or wherever is entirely invisible.
Right.
It's there, but you don't see it. Then all of a sudden, once you've made the decision, I'm going to buy a car, and particularly when you decide a particular make and model, all of a sudden the road is choked with, every car seems to be that car.
Right.
And every car commercial seems to be, it's like they've never stopped advertising. They just advertise around the clock. Some of this is because of incredibly effective social media programming that can identify what you're searching for and follow you. But most of it's really true, whether it's neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, or the equivalent of hypnosis. One way or the other, You know, our brain doesn't care what we point it at.
Now, are you a master practitioner in neurolinguistic programming?
I'm not, but I work with and I refer folks to an NLP certified person occasionally. And again, the results are just amazing.
Right.
But again, it does concern harnessing the power of the brain and pick up connections. If the person you were talking about had never had an interest in going to outer space and had never verbalized it or possibly never wrote it down, nothing would have happened. That's true. It would have just gone.
Well, I can guarantee you this guy will sell you on writing it down. And
Yeah.
Because he just says time after time,
Right.
everything he's written down and put some intent behind.
That's right.
He's gotten there. So you find do you feel like you're on your path?
Yeah, I really do. And that's a great question, because how many people, get to say that they're on their path? This is my original practice concept of your true purpose, is that at any point in anybody's life, there's something we're meant to do. And again, whether that's from a metaphysical or mystical or sacred perspective, or, it just happens to be true, one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves, and in turn the greatest gifts we can give our fellow human beings, is to do what we're meant to do, because we're going to do it really, really well, tremendous amount of passion, and with a great amount of joy.
Life gets a little bit easier too.
Yeah, it does.
Was the advertising a grind, or had you been doing it long enough that you were a bit unhappy with it? And it was
not exactly. I mean, when I first, for example, when I first, I was a college graduate with an English major and was the most unemployable person I can imagine. Really, I could write dreary, dark poetry. It was about the extent of my job skills coming out of college. There wasn't a big call for that. Someone told me that people write television commercials and you could write television commercials, and I knew nothing about it. Threw myself into it just because I needed to eat,
Right.
And by luck or whatever, I just loved it. For years and years, I just loved it. I was trying to imagine what else I could do in the adult world that they'd pay me to do, and writing television was what I got to do. I always thought, God, am I lucky? But there's a season for everything, and so for a long time that was just a tremendous amount of fun. Started my own company, and found out I'm good at like 1 degree out of 360, and made a good choice in hiring a lot of really talented people, much more talented than me, and it just has a life cycle, and so it was time to do something else. And that's what happened.
Now, on your website, I was reading your bio, and you said you've started 4 companies, 2 of them world-class failures.
Yes.
Do you mind if I bring up the world-class failures?
No, not at all. No, not at all. And I think that's really important. If you can't fail, you can't play. And and I've had some really good successes that I don't take credit for, but the catastrophic failures were all me. One of them was. My wife and I and another group started a low-carb superstore, and it was a grocery store that would only have low-carb things.
Okay.
And we were into it ourselves, and so we assumed everybody must really care about this, and wouldn't it be convenient? And of course, we ignored a couple of things like the internet, and the fact actually that the low-carb craze was coming to an end just as we opened the store. Catastrophic wipeout. We lasted about 8 months. It was just almost disaster from day one. Another one that I did I had this idea that I would do a very, very high-end car detailing business, and we called it white glove auto cleaners, and it was very expensive and very fancy and so forth. I had no idea what it takes to detail a car, but I found out the hard way, and that was again about an 8-month complete wipeout disaster. In fact, I had sold gift certificates going into the Christmas time. I thought that I'd be dead in the wintertime, and I would have been. And I had to buy all those gift certificates back because we went out of business. It was a total disaster. But I learned a lot.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask you. What'd you learn?
Well, it certainly got my ego back in right size, among other things. And, I just learned that it's another case where if you believe your own BS, and you don't get the input of other people, you can make some terrible mistakes.
Nice. You know, you've really been a great interview, and here we have a
Thank
couple minutes left. I really want to touch on at ease.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And that's really, really important. You
It
know,
is.
life coaching stuff
Right.
is great, but let's talk about
Yeah.
at ease.
Well, you know, the most exciting thing, you know, in just a few minutes that we have left, the most exciting thing that At Ease is doing is we're working with Creighton University, Tel Aviv University in Israel, and Columbia University in New York City to do a clinical trial of a brand new web-based treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder that is extremely promising. And the reason it's important is that unlike other mental health treatments, this one does not require the patient or the client to relive anything in any way. And we had a clinical trial in these 3 separate markets and had tremendously promising results. In fact, it was the cover story in the American Psychiatry Journal, or Journal of Psychiatry, a couple of months ago. So we're really excited because the cost is almost nothing once you get this on the web.
Tell us how we can reach out to both places, both Double Dare Coaching and At Ease. So we got about 30 seconds.
Sure, thank you. So At Ease is, the website to go to is ateaseusa.org, and a lot of information, including our clinical trial information, is there. And for Double Dare, the Double Dare site is doubledareyou.us.
Okay, everybody, reach out to Scott. This show's been brought to you by Nebraska Counseling and Hypnosis Center. I'm your host, Clovis Colley. Tune in again next week. Thanks for stopping by.